where news comes first. This is WECT News.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'm Frances Weller.
And I'm John Evans. Tonight we're learning more about a controversial bill to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion in public schools across North Carolina.
Senate Bill 227 passed along party lines Tuesday and is headed to the State House. One of the bill's co-sponsors, Republican Senator Michael Lee, is from New Hanover County. WECT's Ava Brangord spoke to Senator Lee ahead of the vote yesterday and joins us now with a breakdown of what happened on the Senate floor. Ava, though the bill was passed, there was lengthy debate from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, that's right. Throughout the debate, Senator Lee reaffirmed that the bill's focus is to stop schools from teaching what he calls divisive concepts about race, gender, and the history of our country. The main argument from Democrats, though, schools should not deprive students of the truth, even if it makes them uncomfortable.
The ayes have it. Senate Bill 227 passes its third reading.
After passing 28-18 in the Republican-controlled state Senate. A bill to stop North Carolina public schools from promoting, quote, discriminatory practices is one step closer to becoming law. But before the vote, lengthy debate between Democrats critical of the bill and the bill's co-sponsor, Republican Senator Michael Lee of New Hanover County.
We should not allow these divisive concepts to continue to seep into our children through our education system.
We want our children to be better than us. We want our children to know the truth about this country.
The bill would effectively ban schools from teaching divisive concepts about race and gender, including topics that make students feel discomfort, guilt, or psychological distress. That prompted Senator Val Applewhite of Cumberland County to bring up Wilmington's own history with racial violence, including the 1898 massacre.
We have messed this up, but we cannot and should not deprive them of the truth just because it makes some uncomfortable.
Lee says that's not what this bill is about.
What I don't want to happen is for us to leave this chamber with some of these things hanging out in the air, thinking somehow that the people that vote for this bill believe that we should be hiding history or discriminating. It's just the opposite.
Lee told us Tuesday the bill is also designed to stop DEI trainings for school employees.
These DEI frameworks that have been institutionalized have actually done just the opposite of what I think most people intended them to provide.
How it'll ultimately impact people of color, women, even kids with disabilities remains to be seen. But for now, the State House will have its chance to make its stamp on Senate Bill 227. Republicans lost their supermajority in the House after the 2024 elections. I asked Senator Lee if he thinks Governor Josh Stein will veto the bill if passed. He believes the governor will agree with what's in the bill, but that remains to be seen. Fran?
Now, Ava, we talked a lot about reaction from state legislators. Have we heard from those at the center of this bill, local school districts?
Yeah, so I spoke to New Hanover County School Superintendent Dr. Christopher Barnes over the phone and asked if this bill is a concern to him. Barnes says this is not a priority right now. Their only focus is passing the district's budget, but they're keeping a close eye on the bill in Raleigh.
All right, Ava, thanks.